Hey, welcome everyone. This is Mind Your Own Business. My name is Pablo, and thanks for listening. Hey everyone, welcome back to Mind Your Own Business with my dog on the background. Maybe now you can see it. I have here Aaron Marshall with me. He's a company culture genius. He's an author. He has courses online on LinkedIn. I encourage everyone to go and check them out. Consultant coach, but also a father and a great human being. So, Aaron, thank you for being here.
Oh, thanks for having me. That's a super generous introduction. Culture genius has never been said of me ever, but I'll take it.
All true. Yeah. So the very first question is, who do you help?
Yeah. Gosh, anybody I can. So I work full time as a COO at the Santa Barbara Zoo, and so hopefully I've got some impact there. Got a ton of great people that do incredible work at the zoo. We've got a really fun culture. It's a neat place to. It's a place where I've learned a ton about culture, and a place where I continue to learn about it and grow with it. And then I've got some coaching work that I do. So I've worked with small companies that are trying to scale, mostly folks going from maybe under 10 to over 50 in a short stretch that realize like, hey, we didn't have a strong culture, and now we're onboarding a bunch of people and we need help figuring this out. Can you help us sort of think through some of these things? And so that work ends up being a lot of mission, vision, and culture work, kind of understanding values and unpacking how are we going to do work together, what agreements are we going to make, maybe what cultural artifacts do we need to develop as an organization. And then I do a lot of work with individuals, so kind of executive coaching, and then supporting executive teams by working with their leadership teams.
And what led you to this path? Or I mean, or yeah, what's your why?
My why, well, what led me there, I'm not sure. I think I'm still trying to figure out the why in some ways. But I actually was a high school teacher for a long time, and had this insatiable entrepreneurial desire that sort of wove through that. So it was building programs, had a small business for a couple of years in there, started a nonprofit doing leadership development with teens. And I think seeing the opportunity to develop what has traditionally been called soft skills in folks as they're working with one another. I think my why is a desire to see healthier work contexts, and I'm feeling like I've got some experience and opportunity to speak into that.
And Aaron, based on your experience, what have you seen is the biggest challenge teams face today? Talking about company culture, because I mean, as far yeah, you could be a relationship in the workplace, company culture, however you want to name it. What's kind of the biggest problem today?
So I'm so bad at picking one thing, right? I think hybrid work is a major challenge in the sense that folks are trying to maintain tight face-to-face relationships, and grow those relationships in a work context without the same casual time together. I know in our experience, remote meetings are incredibly efficient, which is great, but efficiency is not always good for relationship building. And so there's a tension there. Um, I think another challenge maybe is the space between implicit and explicit culture. So the way we talk about work getting done versus the way work actually gets done, and sort of highlighting those hidden areas. I think that can be really challenging when you're onboarding folks, especially if you're growing fast, because often a good part of our culture is hidden. It's implicit, and it takes a while to learn. And the longer it takes to learn, the harder it is to be a good fit. And so, thinking about the onboarding process and what our agreements are about how we're going to work together, which ones are spelled out in cultural artifacts like the employee handbook, or actual agreements about how we're going to do work, versus the shortcuts people take because it's more efficient, or they're used to doing that, or whatever. So I think maybe those are two of the big internal kind of brass tacks challenges. It's not very 30,000 foot, but
And so when you say hidden culture, is that what's happening in reality, in real life, that was not on paper? That I imagine that there's just maybe in some teams maybe there's a gap there.
absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. So we say we say a great urban design has a great analogy for this. So the idea of pathways and desire pathways. So we know that if we go out and we design a city square and we put sidewalks around it, people will inevitably walk across the grass in certain places. And so then we have to decide, like, do we want people to walk across the grass and kill it in these areas, or do we want to put plants at the start of those pathways to redirect people? By analogy, we establish as leaders, we sort of say, hey, we roughly want work to get done in this way. And then people find different ways, sometimes more efficient in good ways, sometimes in ways that kill the grass. And so then we have to sort of surface those hidden, implicit ways that work's getting done and evaluate them and say, hey, is this a better way to do it? If it is, let's make that an official way to get work done. When these things are hidden and we bring new people into the context, it can be difficult for them to know, when I have X problem, do I go to this boss or this boss? And then you get tied up in these mom and dad scenarios that stay hidden, for instance. And surfacing that and saying, hey, actually, let's have role clarity. This person's really in charge of these things, and this person's in charge of these things, and they're both safe to go to. Then we can reset some of those expectations.
That's great. And I think, well, maybe I'm way off, but communication is so critical. Uh, like in your course, you have this example of an animal uh, inside a box, and everybody has to think about it. Uh, yeah, a beetle, I think. So everybody at home, picture a beetle within. All
Yeah,
right,
so
and so
this is a great example from Wittgenstein, right? Philosophy of language. But go ahead, yeah, take us through the setting.
oh no, you're the expert, please.
You're
No.
nailing it. So the idea is that we all imagine a beetle in a box, and so we could even just hold it in our hand, right, and go like, all right, take a good look. What's it look like? Get a really clear picture, and then are we all imagining the same beetle? And inevitably, the answer is yes and no. We're all imagining a beetle, but some of the beetles that we're imagining are black, and some are iridescent, and some have spots, and some have horns, and some have a horn, and some have wings, and some don't. And all of a sudden, we realize that what we mean by beetle is really fuzzy. And I think when we're talking about cultural values in particular, getting clear about what we mean is really important. So we don't want to just have a beetle value. We don't want to say like we respect people. Like, well, okay, cool. Like hopefully everybody does that. What do you mean by that? How do you respect people in a way that is uniquely your company? What does that look like on the ground for your company? And how can you translate that value into the behaviors you would expect from the people in your organization to show that they're living that value out? That's really hard work. It takes a number of conversations, but when you get to that point, then you start to have some soft metrics to invite people into behaving in a particular way that really reflects the heart behind the values that you've identified.
Yeah, I think it's just such a great analogy just to close that bridge, because I think there are four stages. So one is what I'm thinking, two is what I'm actually saying, three is what you're hearing, and four is what you're understanding after all of that, like what you're getting. So in between those stages, communication can be just lost. Um, so that analogy serves as a great example. And on that same note, you also have this great phrase that you use in the LinkedIn scores, which is there anything I can do or stop doing that would make your job easier, or for us to work together better? I am paraphrasing, and you can just correct me here, but yeah.
Yeah, and again, just like the beetle in the box is from a 17th century, I think, philosopher of language. I might have the date wrong there. The phrase you just mentioned came from Radical Candor, which Kim Scott wrote, and I believe she stole that phrase from somebody else, and she credits that in the book. I can't remember who she borrowed it from, but absolutely, I think as leaders, one of the ways that we can invite those who report to us to share is by being vulnerable. And one of the ways we can be vulnerable is saying, hey, is there any way that I can help you better, right? What can I do or stop doing that would make it easier for you to work with me? The downside to that is most people don't want to answer it honestly. And so we have
Mm.
to create space. We have to be persistent with inviting that. And then when people do answer it, we have to be gracious in the way that we receive feedback and process it and be honest about what's going on internally when we feel feedback that we're not excited about. I think that goes to another notion around vulnerability for leaders, and that's that I don't know if we talked about this at all, but the idea of help. Most leaders are really excited to help other people. I think it's a big part of our job as leaders to support and resource the people that report to us. What's harder sometimes is asking for help and asking for it in
Mm.
meaningful ways. And I think just admitting that that's harder is important because it requires a different level of vulnerability. And it also is a good reminder that the people that report to us have to be vulnerable when they ask for help. And often it's easier in a relationship if you have power or position to lead with vulnerability because that invites greater vulnerability, and that's a huge part of building trust. And if we're constantly asking our direct reports to be vulnerable with us, but we're unable to reciprocate by asking for help or being vulnerable in other appropriate ways within the workplace, then it's really difficult to accelerate that trust building.
So, well, I mean, and the way I see it, so we work with people, right? And so these fundamentals of trust, vulnerability, asking for help, you can see those also in family relationships, friendships, intimate relationships, and others, because they're like fundamentals. And at work, we work with people too. It's, yes, we use computers, but they are not computers or colleagues and bosses and whatnot. So, if we can take these fundamentals into the workplace, inevitably we would create a, a great place to work at. And so besides those, I wanted to ask like two, three main very actionable takeaways or activities or exercises people and teams can do today to improve their company culture.
I think probably the easiest thing, like just top of my head, and I've been thinking about this a lot, is finding ways. And I've been thinking about it a lot because it's hard for me. And but finding ways to affirm and praise your team. So keeping the feedback focus on that 10-to-1 ratio of positive to negative. So are you out there with your team? Are you noticing all the things they do well and communicating that to them? Um, and then in that vein, the CEO at the zoo that I work at for years has had this tradition of writing letters to the senior management team at Christmas time, and it is unbelievable how powerful it is to receive a letter from the CEO saying, "Hey, I saw you and I know you." Like identifying things that you've done to contribute to the organization, reflecting on the year, and thanking you. And so I think finding ways to do that. I was just reading an article that was suggesting doing that and sending it to the partner of folks that work for you and just saying, hey, thank you so much for this person that you've invested in who works at our team, or to the parents of an employee, just to say, hey, your son or daughter has been an incredible contributor in our organization. We're really thankful for them. So this idea of praise and gratitude, I think it shifts how we view people. It shifts what we look for. Um, we I can come to things with a critical eye and say, I want this tweaked. I want this tweaked. I'd like a little more here. And that's not bad. But if it's in a context that's absent of a lot of praise, it can feel like a lot of pressure. It can feel draining. It can feel like things are never good enough. And so having to sort of keep the refrain that like things are really good and right. But you don't do that by saying things are really good. You have to have the specific praise to make sure folks feel known and seen and loved.
And by the way, if people want to learn more, not only these examples but more of them, actually Aaron has, like, he wrote a book on habits and activities you can do.
It's I so this is not some like manifesto on habits. It's like super practical, 20 habits, 4 pages a piece. Pick one, read it, work on it for 4 weeks, then pick another one. Yeah, it's for people that want to move the needle, not think 30,000 foot about the stuff.
There you go. So full disclosure, we had a conversation in the past. It was lost due to some technical difficulties. So it was funny. Anyway, I asked Aaron the question of, and I am bringing this up because the response was so uh, beautiful and so like deep that I want to ask it again. And the question was, if you could leave just one phrase as legacy to the world, what would that phrase be? Um,
So nice setup, except do you remember what I said last time? I mean, I could like probably get roughly somewhere near it, but you were so
yeah.
excited about it. I don't want to mess it up.
No, I mean, we talked about love and doing things in the moment and enjoying things. But yeah.
So I think for me, like legacy, I look at how people are living today, how I'm living, what it's like to be in my. I've got a brilliant wife and three kids that are 14, 12, and 10, and we are living in the thick of fast-paced life. I think whew, I would say resting in who we were created to be feels like a legacy that I want to encourage folks in. And if I can help people get to a place where they're resting, if I can invite people into a space of rest in who they were, like, we are so distracted, right? We have so many things calling for our attention all the time, and it's not a digital problem, although digital tools um, compound it. It's deeper than that, and we want to be hurried and rushed through life, and that keeps us distracted, and I think that's really dangerous. And and maybe the outflow of resting in who we were created to be means moving into relationships where we're known, where we're seen, where we're loved. Like, I think those are some of the deepest cravings of our hearts, to be known and seen and loved. And I think when we move in communities that that walk that with us, that's where we can slow down a little bit and really find meaning and purpose. So for me, that there's a huge sort of faith perspective associated with that. But I think that's where the gold of life is, and that's where I want to be moving myself. That's where I want to be moving my family. Um, and I still find myself struggling with the distractions of the day to day. So it's an
It, it
ongoing challenge, right?
it really is. I mean, if you think about religions like meditation and these meditative states and or being in the zone, or yoga, which is meditation of the West, it's always been hard. That's kind of the goal. The goal is to live in the present moment, not to be as distracted. I think Aristotle even talked about this 5,000 years ago. And then anyway, yeah, not to get too deep here, but yeah, even religions try to bring us back to the present moment.
I
I still
love the
love.
word present, right? Like, it's like it's the thing that's wrapped under the Christmas tree, maybe, and it's also like this moment right here. And
I
there's
know.
there's something beautiful about it having those two meanings.
So I think that's the best way to wrap up. Aaron, thank you so much. I appreciate you. I acknowledge what you do. What you do matters so much to so many people. To people who are involved in this mission of improving our lives. Um, thank you. I'll leave the links in the show notes so everybody can just check them out, get the books, reach out. So where can people find you?
Find me on
LinkedIn.
LinkedIn. I'd love to carry on conversations. You can just message me, connect with me there. Um, and keep hanging out at this podcast. Pablo is an amazing guy. It's been really fun, Pablo, to get to know you this last stretch and have a few conversations with you. So really appreciate you reaching out and connecting.
All right, Aaron. Thank you so much, everybody. Thanks.
Thanks.
See ya.
Take care.